Wow. Welcome to Target, the show for masculinity and success. And I'm your host, Atlas Aultman, former military commander turned best-selling author, now bringing you a podcast that you can use. We're sharing stories from highly successful men so that you can figure it out for yourself. Welcome. This is Targeted.
All right, welcome back to Targeted. Today I have an emergency guest. I called him on the way up here. I said, dude, I got some studio time. Let's knock this out. Will you do it, please? And he said yes. So today I have Joe Uzpen. Joe Uzpen and I have been friends for a very long time, since our time at the White House. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But for people who may not know you, who would you describe yourself as?
Great. Well, Josh said it perfectly. Joe Uzpen. 24 years in the military, retired. I would describe myself as a father, husband, and then a medical provider. All three of those things go hand in hand. You can't be one without the other, I think, to be successful. So that's who I describe myself as.
Man, that's so accurate, too. You've always been so humble, too. Like, they pick a certain person to be in the positions of, like, extreme crisis, and you're always just so calm. I know you've seen a lot of stuff throughout your time in medicine, but, like, you're always so calm. How did you learn how to be so calm?
Yeah, I think, I appreciate you saying that. But yeah, I think humility is a huge thing in medicine. But yeah, remaining calm when everyone else is panicked. On the outside, I look calm. On the inside, obviously, the heartbeat's going, it's racing. But, to build trust and for your patients to really feel like, wow, this guy knows what he's doing, he's in control, you have to remain calm. Even when you don't know what you're doing, act like you know what you're doing. Obviously, don't do anything that's going to harm anybody, but remain calm is a big thing, because if everyone else panics, if you panic, everyone else is going to panic, and then it just goes awry from there.
You nailed that our whole time. So let me just take it back one step and tell you how I met this man. We were working at the White House together for a couple of years. I think you left in 2013, right?
2013, yep.
Yeah, and I left in 2014. So we had a couple of years of overlap. You were directly in the White House when I went over to the White House after coming off the road, but I used to see you all the time on the road. Yeah. How did you get to that position? I know, so you're Air Force, I'm Air Force. Air Force has a different stick when it comes to these special jobs, and they really try to weed out the people that are going to make the Air Force look bad.
Yeah.
And then you end up getting a tight-knit group of Air Force people, in this case in the White House. Yeah. How did you do that? Can you walk us through that, navigate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of lucked into it, I feel like. Opportunity, door opens, you got to walk through. But so I just gotten back from Afghanistan deployment. I was gone for 9 months.
Where were you?
Afghanistan, Gardez.
In Gardez, okay.
Yeah. And so spent some time there, got back, had been back maybe 3 months and found out I was going to deploy again. They had changed my bucket, so now the new bucket was coming up. And, I was like, okay, I got to do what you got to do. So I was preparing to do that. And then one of my good friends called me. I said, hey, you should consider applying for this White House job. This just opened up. I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm qualified. I'd only been a PA probably, let's see, that's 2008 when I applied. Started in 2009. So yeah, about 2008. And I was like, well, I'd only been a PA for 6 years. But I deployed twice already for that. And I said, all right, well, what do I have to lose? So I put in my application, and the way the Air Force works is, you meet a little board at the Air Force, Pentagon weeds through some packages, and then they send 5 or 6 up to the White House, and then you have then you go there for a couple days to interview. I think really what got me through is you kind of talked about remain calm. At first I was like, wow, this would be a great job. I was really nervous about it. But then I was like, I'm not going to get it. So when else are you going to be in the White House and be able to see these things? Yeah. So I was super relaxed. I was asking the butler, like, hey, what's in that room? You want to see it? They showed me the library. Yeah. Just super calm, because I thought, this is my only opportunity to be behind the scenes and see the White House. So long story short, 3 months later, they called me up. They offered me the job. And I was floored. I was like, hey, just curiosity, why'd you offer me the job? They're like, you were so relaxed, you were so calm. And we figured, a lot of this job is sitting back behind the scenes, standing in kitchens talking to each other, and they felt like, hey, you'd be a good person to talk to. So long story short, I got the job and got to meet you and a lot of great other people. So many great professionals came out of that those assignments that, lifelong friends. So appreciate being here.
Yeah, man, obviously I'm biased. I think we had the best crew. And I've talked to people that are still, Actually, Doc Jones, James Jones was texting me earlier today. I told him we were going to be in a studio, and I said, "Can I ask him the question I always ask you?" So let me go ahead and knock that out.
Absolutely.
Because he always ask. I always ask him questions since he's published his book. He's been really receptive to my questions, and I appreciate that. So, what I ask him, and now I'm going to ask you, is what is the most important leadership trait that you are required to have as a medical professional?
I think for medical, it's empathy. People have to know that you really care. Whether it's the patient, one-on-one with the patient, or it's the rest of your staff, other nurses, other PAs, doctors. Anything you want to make a change for in medicine, they need to know that you have the patient in mind and that you care. And if you don't care, no one's going to listen because it's really about the patient. A lot of people say in medicine, nobody cares what you know until they know how much you care, and that's true. And so it goes a long way. So I think really empathy is huge for a medical provider. You have to be able to empathize with your patient, empathize with the people you're working for, and sacrifice. You got to be able to sacrifice for your patients and for your colleagues.
That's amazing. How do you teach empathy? Is it something you think you can teach?
No, I don't think you can teach it, but I think everybody's lived it. You can always give an example to somebody like, hey, maybe you haven't been homeless, but you've been a time where there's something you couldn't have because, you had to go without because you weren't making enough money or, you were stretched a little thin, so you had to make a sacrifice. So, not to the same degree as a homeless person, but you can still kind of understand what it's like to go without. And then if you don't, just listen, sit down, try to put yourself in their shoes and just listen to what they have to say. I bring up homeless people. That's when I worked my last assignment in the emergency department. Coming from a military, didn't have a lot of psychiatric patients, didn't have a lot of patients that used or abused drugs. And that turned out to be actually one of my favorite places to work in the emergency department. We had an emergency psych area. And just to try to sit down and get on a one-to-one with people and kind of understand, hey, what got them to the position they're at without judgment, and just say, hey, if you need help or you're looking to get into ChemDep treatment, whatever you need, I'm willing to help you when you're ready because you're not going to be able to force them. And so it's kind of like things. But that was one of the areas I really enjoyed working at, and just a lot of interesting stories, people, and you kind of see people at a different, kind of at a different spot in life than I had experienced. And if you can help one or two of those people, you feel like you've made a success. So,
well, you've helped more than one or two. I can
hope
attest. So we used to catch your name on the roster, the mission roster. Because for those of you that don't know, the military machine that goes behind the office of the president, it includes a medical element, in my case, the communications element, and then all the things we normally see, Air Force One, the helicopter, all that stuff. It comes with a high level of competency, but we'd always look for the person that was the medical provider to kind of sew everything together. And whenever we see your name on the president's calendar, we would take a deep breath and be like, "This is going to be good. We're going to be good." Because you brought that calm, man. You brought it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, especially that there's such great teamwork. When you work at the White House and you're a medical provider, if something happens to the president, everybody's going to know it. But there's not a lot of hands-on medical care going. So where we really could contribute is when you guys got sick, if you guys needed something, right? And that's kind of one of the things I like to pride myself on is, it didn't matter what time. If one of the comms guys, mill aide, anybody was sick, we were there to help you out. We had a skill set. You guys brought a skill set, and we were willing to, help each other out. James Jones, great example of it. He built a huge, a whole clinic at the White House comms agency, right, at Waka, which is hopefully still there today, but super success. Yeah. And so, James is a phenomenal leader. You talk about mentors. James is a great mentor. You watch what James has done in his career. Any PA, you want to look at a way to do it right. Look at James Jones. Look at Bill Solis. Yes. I don't know if you've talked to Bill recently. Bill's first general officer, PA. Awesome. All were there when we were there. Yeah. And, if you surround yourself with great people, some of it's going to rub off on. Even if you don't want it to, some of it's going to rub off on you. So,
I subscribe to that. I mean, I got on a TEDx stage and totally talked about being around people like you and being on elite teams and how that shaped me into the person I am. And it rubs off. You're 100%. But in medical and in the leadership role, like you always are, you always have to set the example. So let me ask you this question. in a joint environment, joint being Army, Air Force, Navy, which you were a part of in the White House Medical Unit. How did you see that change, or did it change whenever you're around your new teammates that weren't necessarily in the Air Force?
Yeah, I don't think it changed. You learn from each other. Obviously, every service does it a little different. Army guys love to give Air Force grief about we go to war, we have air conditioning. Hey, there's nothing wrong with being air conditioned in war, right? But the little jabs like that. But I think in the end, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to take care of the soldier, the airmen, the seamen, et cetera. So we're all trying to take care of the troops, and hopefully they all get home, safe and sound. And so I think just knowing that, and you know the experiences. I'd worked with Army medics, Army Navy corpsmen when I was deployed, and you know what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And so everyone brings their own little specialized area, and you learn from each other. But in the end, it's all medicine. It's still the same thing. We still all bleed the same. Our heart still beats the same. Take a deep breath and get the job done. But so in the end, it's easy to work with people that have the same mission in mind, and that same mindset is like, hey, let's bring our people home better, if you can, better than when they got there. Sometimes that isn't always the case, but I think that's the mindset you have to have, is like, hey, you want to make sure everybody comes home, and then anything you can do for them while they're deployed, take care of them.
I love that. Now, let me ask you, because I've seen you've been in the news a couple times where you've shared some stories about your experiences in the White House, and those are always people are going to ask you all the time, hey, tell me about your time at the White House. Sure. What do you tell them whenever they ask that question? Or do you want to tell us a new story, maybe not involve a rock star this time? Sure. I don't know. Up to you.
Yeah, so you've done your research, yeah. Well, I mean, I think I'll tell you, there's so many great stories. The one story, obviously we can't share any medical stories, but it's the people stories. And I was lucky enough to be there when President Obama, from his inauguration through his first term and a little bit into the second term. And so it was a historic occasion, first African-American president. There was, people were going crazy. And so people would get so excited. We would get called regularly because someone would pass out on a tour because they would get a glimpse of either the president or the first lady. And so one of my favorite stories is, when we went to hotels, the hotel they would appoint someone to run the elevator, right? Mm-hmm. You probably remember this. Yeah. And it's usually just an employee from the hotel that's done good work, and the hotel picks them. And their sole job is the president gets on and you hit the floor that he's staying on. That's all you have to do. Yep. So President Obama gets on the elevator, we slide behind him. Boom, this lady pushes the button. She's just staring at that button, finger on there. President Obama looks at her and tries to shake her hand. She will not take her finger off the button. She's got one job, hit the button, and she's not going to fail. Finally, he's like, come on, you can't leave me hanging. Finally, she kind of turns and shakes his hand, and, he kind of gives her a hug because he was very personal with people like that. But that wasn't one of the things. It was like she was so nervous that she was like, I've got one job, I have to push the button, and she was not going to fail. So she did not let go of that button. But there's tons of stories like that where people would meet the president, meet the first lady, and they were just, amazed, especially being the first African American. She was African American. Mm-hmm. She didn't know in her lifetime if she would see that. And to experience that firsthand, that was just a moving moment. So that was one of the stories I loved about the White House. There's all kinds of cool things. You meet cool people, you meet rock stars, little things that happen. You find out everyone's basically the same as you. They're all human. They got different stories, different ways they got there, which is part of the reason you do shows like this.
Well, yeah. The elevator things, the elevator story. President Obama, he got really, really animated on elevators where he would almost have a comedy routine. He was making everybody die. Yeah. So I could only imagine someone being nervous in that moment where he's just trying to be a person and not the president, and people see him for what he is. But you had to imagine the first couple of years were probably really hard for you guys because there was a lot of people trying to get into his presence. And then when they got there, they were probably shocked a little bit, and that created a lot of medical emergencies, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great story. I'm not going to mention their name, but we had a new doc that came on, and President was given a speech in the Yellow Room, and just like always happens, someone passes out because either you don't feel good that day or whatever, but you're not missing your chance to see the president speak. So, elderly lady, she passes out. She's like in the first row, and we try to just kind of go up. You kind of ease them out of the shot, move them away, and kind of give her attention. And so this one provider, like he's probably been there a couple months. He takes a look at her, and standard medical questions. Hey, do you know where you are? Do you know what the date is? Common one you ask in medical, do you know who the president is? Probably not the best one to ask in that thing, but he did. So he asked the president, and she just points at the stage and points at him, which we're like, hey, man, maybe you need to think about a different third question because that one's a little too easy. But little things like that, it makes the mood lighthearted. Even the patient kind of laughed about that. And, most of the time they just pass out because they're either excited or they didn't drink enough because you know how it is. Sometimes they have to wait for hours. By the time they get screened and cleared and they're waiting inside. So they can be there for a long time before they actually have the event. So, but that was another great story where, we just kind of can laugh at ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I've been brought on the news to break stories for when Trump was trying running for president. He was getting the assassination attempts. Mm-hmm. And they're like, so what is it like? I'm like, well, it's different when he's the president than when he's not. And so like that whole instance where he was getting the assassination attempts, I was like, there probably isn't a medical element like there would be as the president of the United States. So like seeing all that happen the way it did, it's not standard. I can't really talk to that. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you what, man, I was pretty impressed with the ability to get him off of the stage and then get him to care without having medical presence like what you guys would have normally provided. Because, whenever you see something like that on TV and it plays out and you're like, okay, well, this is probably what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen, and then it doesn't because he's not the president. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, yeah. He's the former president, not the current president, and that introduces a whole lot of drama. But for people who are currently in that role, man, they have a lot to say to you in the thankful tone because you made their lives a lot better based off of your experience probably through the first couple of years of the Obama administration. But you were looking at the whole team holistically, the president and then the people around the president, and you're like, the people supporting the president are supporting the president. Yeah. So it's supporting the president. And did you grow the team while you were there?
Yeah, the team definitely expanded while I was there. And I'll tell you, it's funny that you bring that up. I was the first medical person to win the White House Company Grade Officer of the Year, right? And I honestly believe to this day the reason I won it is one of the board questions was, tell me how you've contributed to the mission. Mm. And it was probably the second year I'd been there. And I said, honestly, the only way I've contributed to the mission is by taking care of the people around the president, making sure that they were feeling healthy, that they could do their job. Yeah. If they were sleep deprived, if they were sick or whatever, taking care of them. And I think that's what won it. And honestly, that was probably the most I contributed there, honestly, is people don't realize what happens behind the scenes. They don't understand how hard the comms guys work. Like, Josh, you guys were on the road weeks before we got there, setting up everything, making sure the comms at every site worked. And people don't understand how much footprint happens behind the scenes, and you guys work really hard. And so just being able to, hey, if it's just having ibuprofen available for you or, something as simple as that, or, hey, just someone to talk to, I think that's how I contributed, and I feel very proud about that. I see all the accomplishments of people that have worked there, and I feel like, hey, I had a little bit of part of that.
You had a lot of part of that. I mean, just like I said, the team you're around builds you up, and I'm a big advocate for the people. Like, you shaped me, man. Whether you know it or not, just being around you on missions around the world, it made me a different and better person, and I got to give you guys credit for that. All right. Let me move into emergency room situation. I know you can't talk about specific medical. You can't talk about any names, but can you give us a story of something that just absolutely shocked you while you were experiencing emergency situations from a civilian perspective for the first time?
Yeah, well, like I said, the thing that surprised me the most was how much I enjoyed working in the psychiatric emergency department. We have a small section that was basically a locked 11-bed unit. Coming from the military, I was nervous. I'm like, man, I've never dealt with this. I was like, studying up on what meds, what drugs am I supposed to give, that kind of stuff. And I just kind of we had social workers that worked there. I'm like, I'm going to cling on to social worker. She's been here for 20 years. She's seen it all. I'm clinging on to this person, right? And so, so she kind of took me under her wing, was kind of showing me, this is what's important, this isn't. And so, a little humorous thing, and I'm not going to share any names or anything, but there was a patient. This particular social worker was kind of known for, she could discharge anybody. Like, someone would be coming in and thinking they're God, and she's discharged. And everyone's like, well, you can't discharge that person. Well, they're not thinking about hurting themselves or anybody else, so yes, I can. So she came up to me, and I'd already seen this patient, and she came up, she goes, I think we can discharge this patient. I said, okay, sounds good. And I look up, and we had this little section, we were kind of walled off behind plexiglass away from the patients. And I look out, and there's a man completely naked, covered in soap bubbles, standing in the middle of the day room where there's a TV.
Soap bubbles.
Yep, he's just sudsed up. It really looked like the Abdominal Snowman, right?
How does that even happen?
So he went in the shower, just sudsed up, walked out, and was standing there naked. I look, this is the patient she was talking about. So I was like, you mean that guy? And she just turns around, she's like, I think I need to reassess. I said, probably a good idea. But little things like that happen in the emergency department. Sometimes people, take a little longer to clear, whatever. But the thing that gets you through an emergency room shift is the humor and working with other people. And that's the same in anything.
Yeah.
Nurses, blessed nurses that work in the emergency department, they're not heroes because they work there. They're heroes because they go back. So many nurses I've seen assaulted because they're front line. They're right next to the patient, right? Yeah. Provider, we're a little bit farther off, but the nurse has to touch them to draw blood, has to get the vitals and stuff like that. But I've always said they're definitely the heroes of the emergency department because they come back. They'll have a horrible shift, and the next day they're smiling, ready to do it again. So, the nice thing about the emergency room is it's chaos, but it's controlled chaos. One of the big things when COVID hit, working in the emergency department, we thought it was going to be horrible, right? Tons of people. Well, in Minnesota where I was working, it wasn't. We basically had a huge drop. People were afraid to come to the hospital because they didn't want to be exposed to someone with COVID and catch it.
Fair.
So we actually had to furlough people because it was so dead. Like we were seeing, on a high when I left, we'd see over 300 patients a day. During COVID, under 100.
Really?
And so it was dramatically dropped. Where you get places like New York, they were getting just crushed, right? So we had a lot of our nurses that actually went and took traveler jobs out and helped out in New York and stuff like that. But one of the things I learned from COVID is, you can prepare, but you don't know really what's going to happen. We were all thinking we were going to be like what was happening in New York.
Yeah.
But we weren't, thank God. But right after COVID, then we had a massive boom. Now we have people coming like crazy. So, traumas all the time. We have residents that work in our emergency department, which is important. People have to learn. And so working with residents and seeing residents when the little light bulb goes off and they finally like, ooh, I get it. You kind of see that. That's a nice thing to see in the emergency department working as a team. So lots of good stories in the emergency department. Not a lot that I probably should share, but, it's life and death and seeing, it's not like TV where you see people that a lot of times if someone's flatline, they're not coming back. You see people flatline shock, they come back, they don't. But people that are in other rhythms, you can shock them, they come back. And so the success stories are nice. And seeing people that walking with loved one there and you save someone, that's always a good feeling.
That's got to feel like heartwarming.
It feels great. And the nice thing about it is, you haven't just affected that person. You've affected everyone that person's going to touch after that. So you just hope that, you save a nice person. But, like police officers, whatever, anyone you save, you're also going to affect everybody down the road. So you have a big impact that you don't even realize. And so I like to believe in, I always assume good intent. So I always think everybody I saved is a great person and is doing great things right now.
I like it. Did Mr. Bubbles come back after you discharged him?
Mr. Bubbles is a regular, yeah. So yeah, there's some of them, mental illness, we definitely have a long way to go in this country. But, people, to me, like when talk about a disease I wouldn't want to have, schizophrenia is the disease I wouldn't want to have.
Really? Why?
I mean, if you have to take a medication every day to be normal, and you forget and you're not normal, I can't remember taking aspirin every day or multivitamin.
Fair.
Can you imagine like that if you stop taking your meds, you kind of no longer realize that you need them, that kind of stuff, and it quickly goes. So you see it's a vicious cycle. People are in and out of the emergency department. So you definitely got to help those people out. And that's why I said, if you see one of the people on the street, they're talking to themselves, acting funny, not hurting anybody, don't be afraid of them. Be kind, smile. You never know where that person came or what their background is.
Yeah, where they're going.
Yeah.
I like your outlook of, I'm going to save this person. Who knows what they'll become?
Yeah.
Because you just don't know.
Right.
You don't know what kind of influence they're going to put themselves in to a different environment potentially, and that might change the whole perspective. Speaking of changing of perspectives, let me get your thoughts on social media, because I see social media as like fake book. People get on there, they post just the best things, and then other people compare themselves to other people's bests. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing that as a positive or a negative influence? I know that there's a lot to talk about there, but what are some common thoughts, some things you're thinking about with social media?
Yeah, I think social media is kind of a negative for the most part. Having information at your fingertips is great. When like Facebook and stuff came on, everyone thought, oh, it's great. You can share pictures of your family, blah, blah, blah. But the things that people will say to one another on Facebook, they wouldn't say face to face, right? And some of the things are so hurtful, and our country's become so divided politically. Like, hey, if you voted for Trump or you voted for Kamala, it shouldn't matter. The only way we're ever going to find common ground is by talking to each other.
That's true.
But unfortunately, what I've seen is there's divisions where people who voted for Kamala are only talking to people who voted for her, and people who voted for Trump are only talking to people who voted for Trump. And we're never going to heal as a country until people start coming across lines. And I don't know how you do that in social media, because a lot of times I find people will unlike people they don't like. So they're not going to hear the other opinion, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't unlike anybody. I'll listen to all opinions, because you know what? You're going to learn something. If you listen to other people, you're going to learn something.
I like that. I like that approach too. So I have unfollowed people that are just never coming back, and maybe I don't want to listen to them. But I have people that I go to, and I'm like, this is what I'm seeing. And I know that they're on the opposite end of what I am politically. So I'm like, show me what you're seeing. And they do this thing back and forth where we actually share it. And that's probably healthy. But I think social media is, I think to your point, it's hard to gauge. Like, how do you change that? It's not something I think people can regulate. But I wonder if it plays into mental health. And
I think it for sure it does. I can't imagine growing up. They didn't have social media when I was growing up as a kid. You had to remember someone's phone number and call them, or you were just outside playing with them and talking to them, face to face. And the bullying and the stuff that happens on social media that high schoolers and kids have to deal with nowadays, I can't imagine. But it does. It's amazing how it does affect their mental health, because, like you said, you only see good things. So when kids that maybe don't have it so great are seeing all these good things, they think, well, what's wrong with me? I should be that way to be happy, right?
Yeah.
And it definitely causes problems. There's more depression in our younger kids. It's record levels.
for sure.
And I think, hopefully we can find a happy medium. There's going to have to be something that's going to have to change, I think. How we do that, I don't know. But, with AI and everything coming up, who knows? It seems like technology's flipping every 6 months now instead of every 6 years, right?
It's
just
crazy.
so fast.
Yeah, it's Moore's Law and how it gets faster and faster. But I recently posted something from Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was on a 10X stage with Grant Cardone, and he was talking about percentages of people who are unhappy in their professions. And he said, as the stat was 78% of Americans are not happy in their jobs. And he blames the Americans for not having a plan. He's like, you live in America. You have the most opportunity of anywhere in the world, and it's like you getting into the best operating room for the easiest procedure, and then not being able to perform anything because you don't know what you're going to do. So he uses an airplane analogy. I'm just using a medical one because it kind of makes more sense whenever you're starting to look at the percentage, and a majority of people are unhappy already, and I think social media compounds that. But we'll step away from that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. If you could go back 20 years and talk to yourself and give yourself 3 tips, what would those tips be?
Well, that's a really good question. One, listen more than you speak. I think that was probably something I learned a little later in life. You need to sit down and just listen to the other person. You learn so much more by listening than you do speaking, and I think that's one thing. Second thing, spend more time with my family. You're not going to get that time back. I have 3 great daughters. They're all very successful, thank God. I've got one works for a pharmacy company. The other one's a public defender in Colorado Springs, and the youngest is a mechanical engineer. So all 3 of them have been very successful. But I'm never going to get that time back when they were younger. Even when we were at the White House, we were gone all the time. On the road all the time. And so my daughters weren't big into, one of them was into rowing. And so I missed all that. I missed a lot of those matches and stuff. And I just wish I would have spent a little more time when I was off, the limited time we did, with them. And so that was the other thing. Just appreciate the time you have with family. Third, bring others with you. You're going to be successful if you bring others along. If you mentored, I'm one PA, but if I mentored 10 PAs, that's exponential how many more patients we help. And I think just bring other people along with you with your successes, I think is probably the third thing I would say.
So listen more, family, and then mentor and bring people along. That's amazing advice. That's amazing advice. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom with us and doing this studio. I didn't even know you were in Vegas until I was coming here, and my fiance was like, "Hey, you need to hit up Joe. He's there," and he still calls you Josh. I'm like, "Well, that's what he knew me as." So it's great to sit down with you again, see you and hang out with you. I just want to say thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me on. This has been fabulous. And it's such a small world. You never know where you're going to run into someone. Speaking of your fiance, I met her. She works for a company we work with, and I had said something like, "Well, say hi to Josh," and she's like, "Josh? Who's Josh?" I'm like, "You forgot him already?" Because she knows he has Atlas, right? So, small world. But thanks for having me on, and thanks for all you do. I've watched your stuff online. It's fabulous. You're doing a great service for everyone. Everyone should watch them. Probably not this one. I'm not as great as some of his other guests, but just fabulous. You're doing great work.
No, man, you're a perfect fit for this show because we bring on successful people and they share tips to get other people successful. So since you shared, I'm going to give you this. It's branded, targeted podcast, Wounded Warrior. It's got a pen on this side. On the other side, it's got a device you can clean out little small tools. I use it for my iPhone. It's got a screwdriver and a Coke bottle opener. That's how I think we're supposed to say it. Nice. And if you ever get stuck inside your vehicle and you're in the water, you can break the glass. And awesome. It's airport friendly, and we paired with Wounded Warrior Project on this to make that happen. So I wanted to give you that for coming on.
Wow, I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Joe.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure.
And for everyone else, thanks for tuning in. This is an amazing opportunity to talk to someone who's not only been there but done it and has amazing stories that you're probably going to see more of. Check him out. We'll put his socials in the show notes. And until next time, stay on target.
Stay with us as we stay on target with another awesome episode coming up next. We'll see you there. And subscribe to Targeted Now. As an ambassador to buckedup.com, I get to give you our special discount. That's Atlas25 when you go to buckedup.com to get that special discount. Only for our listeners, Atlas25. Go to buckedup.com now.
This is Atlas Aultman. I am sitting here with my computer doing the final edits. My dog's just chilling out, and I'm looking for a Fight Scrub commercial. And instead of just finding one, I'm just going to tell you my thoughts on it because hey, it's late, and why not listen to me since it's my show? This is something I found through a gym that I go to, and the guy who owns it, the guy who was on my show, is he's an amazing guy, and he tells a story on the show. But where this is a natural product. It is a clean product, not chemicals, and it helps you with anything that you do that you need to sanitize. So for me in MMA, when I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I can do into my really old age, when I'm broken, I can do Jiu-Jitsu and I'll keep doing it. I get really sweaty, and then I don't want to smell like other dudes when I come home, and see the family and see my dog and all that. So I spray this stuff on me. I get in the car. My car doesn't smell bad, but then I feel cleaner. I'm not going to get any skin infections. It's an amazing product. It has different flavors of flavors. It's got different smells, but you can put it on your skin. You can spray it all over your clothes. You can spray it all over your gis. You can throw it in your gym bags. It's awesome. But if you play football and you have pads, it's awesome for that. Muay Thai, whenever I do Muay Thai or boxing, I take my boxing gloves off. I spray the crap out of it. It's a good thing to have. If you're using Clorox or whatever. This is a great alternative. I've been using it for a while. Highly recommend it. There's a link in my bio if you want a discount. Please use my link. I do this for people so that they can get the products that I use. This is one of them. Check it out. Fight Scrub. Check it out.